The sky had turned the color of wet concrete, thick clouds churning above like boiling smoke. The rain didn't fall. It lashed sideways, relentless, as if the air itself intended to flay skin from bone. Trees bent, contorting as if bowing to an unseen deity, and anything unsecured was long gone. Boats, trash cans, shingles, fence posts, all swept away by the wind hours earlier. It was the kind of storm that made silence a menace. Jamal Thompson stood at its heart, drenched in his bright orange rescue suit, gripping the side of the aluminum boat as it careened over another wave. Fear wasn't an option. There was no time. But his jaw was set and his shoulders were rigid as if he contained something immense, something mightier than the wind. The boat, though not small, felt like a tin can adrift in the Atlantic amidst East Point, Florida's submerged ghost town. Rooftops protruded from the murky water like desolate stepping stones. A crooked chimney, a plastic pink flamingo impaled against a gutter, the tops of trees resembling skeletal hands. Everything else had vanished. 4 men occupied the boat. Captain Brooks, short, broad, with a beer belly spilling over his belt and a voice perpetually spoiling for an argument, was at the wheel, squinting through the sheets of rain. To his right sat Officer Danvers and Officer Kellum, both white, both in their mid-30s. Danvers chewed gum as if he loathed the flavor, while Kellum tapped a water bottle against his knee, a rhythmic signal of his longing to be elsewhere. They'd been on this route for almost an hour. "All right." Brooks bellowed over the wind. "1 more block, let's wrap this up. Folks down by the bridge still need evac." Jamal leaned forward, peering toward the last row of submerged houses. "We didn't check that far house," he said, pointing to the street's end, or what remained of it, the one with the chimney still standing. Brooks gave it a dismissive glance, then waved it off. "We're not finding anyone there. That area got the evac order 2 days ago." Danvers barked a laugh. "Anyone still up there now either can't swim or wants to drown." Jamal didn't join the laughter. "We still need to check." Brooks sighed, grabbing the megaphone. "Standard sweep protocol, kid." He held the cone to his mouth and shouted into the rain, "Rescue team. Is anyone inside this residence?" Silence. Only the wind's moan and the occasional creak of something giving way under pressure. Brooks lowered the megaphone, turning the boat slightly. "See? Nothing. Let's move." Jamal's voice cut through the air. "Captain, we should check it properly." Brooks turned, eyebrows raised. "You see a hand waving? Hear anyone screaming?" "No," Jamal said quietly, "but that doesn't mean they're not there." Danvers rolled his eyes. "Jesus, not again." Kellum muttered, "Always got to be the hero." Brooks scowled. "We've got limited time, Thompson. There are people at the bridge, families, kids. You want to waste 15 minutes on an empty attic?" "I'm not wasting time," Jamal stated. "I'm doing my job." Brooks stepped closer, his voice dropping but not softening. "You trying to make us look bad, is that it?" Jamal didn't move. His heart was pounding now, not from fear but from a buried anger. "You do what you want," Brooks said, stepping back. "You want to play cowboy? Be my guest." He motioned toward the raft secured to the boat's stern. "Take the spare, tie yourself off. Don't expect us to come chasing if it flips." Jamal didn't reply. He moved to the back, his hands calmly unfastening the small emergency raft with practiced fingers. As he dropped it into the water, Danvers leaned toward Kellum and muttered something. Kellum chuckled, loud enough for Jamal to hear. Brooks added one last thing, just loud enough to cut through the rain. "You people always got something to prove." Jamal froze for half a second, then without a word he stepped into the raft and paddled away. The main boat turned and sped off, leaving a wake that quickly dissolved in the churning water. Now it was just Jamal, the storm, the silence, and that last crooked rooftop ahead. And someone, or perhaps no one, waiting. The raft was slower than anticipated. The current pulled harder out here, just past the former treeline. Every few strokes, Jamal had to pause and reorient himself, his gaze fixed on the warped roof ahead. The house leaned slightly to the left, its chimney the only part standing completely upright. Shingles were peeled back like old skin, and what might have been a second-story window was now a jagged black void. Jamal's breathing was controlled but heavy. Each push of the oar was deliberate. He wasn't just battling water, he was fighting time. The wind still howled around him, but there was something about this house, something about its refusal to collapse, how the chimney stood tall while everything else had yielded. It felt alive, alive in a way the others hadn't. He didn't know why, he just knew he had to reach it. As the raft softly scraped against the roof's edge, he reached for the anchor line, quickly looping it around a broken pine limb, stripped of bark and sharpened by the storm, poking through the surface. He tested the knot, then took the backup rope from his pack and slung it over his shoulder, tying one end to the raft and wrapping the other around his wrist. The water was colder now, surprisingly so. He stepped carefully onto the slick roof, his boots slipping slightly. The wind was strong enough to push him sideways if he didn't brace himself. He crouched, trying to keep his center of gravity low as he inched closer to the chimney. Then he saw her. At first she didn't look real, just a shape huddled against the brick column's base, like a bundle of old coats or a forgotten blanket. But then a gust of wind shifted her hair, gray and clinging to her cheeks, and Jamal's breath caught in his throat. She wasn't moving, but she was there. "Ma'am?" he called, his voice low but clear. No answer. He took another step. The roof creaked beneath his weight. "Ma'am, I'm here to help. My name's Jamal, I'm with the rescue team." Still nothing. He moved closer, 1 foot at a time, testing each step. When he was only a few feet away, he could see her more clearly. Her skin was pale, tinged with blue. Her hands were wrapped around the chimney pipe, knuckles white. Her dress was soaked, clinging to her frail body like wet paper. She wasn't shaking. That scared him more. He crouched beside her. "Can you hear me?" he asked gently, reaching toward her shoulder. "You're safe now." She stirred, just a little. Her eyes fluttered open, glassy, unfocused. They were cloudy, filled with tears, though he couldn't tell if it was from the rain or from crying. I'm waiting," she whispered. Jamal leaned in, the rain hitting the side of his neck, sliding under his collar. "Waiting for who, ma'am?" "My son. My husband," she said slowly, her voice cracking like old wood. "They'll come back for me. I can't leave." Jamal's chest tightened. The way she said it, like a promise, like a vow. "We can't stay," he said softly. "The storm's not done. It's going to get worse tonight. Please let me help you." She looked at him, then truly looked. Her eyes met his and he saw it, not fear but grief, a grief that had settled into her bones. Her lips trembled. "They told me, if it ever got this bad, go to the roof. They'd find me. My son. He's a rescue officer like you." Jamal swallowed hard. "They're not here, ma'am," he said, his voice low. "But I am." Her grip loosened on the pipe, her fingers slipping slowly as if she were letting go of more than just the metal. Jamal didn't rush her, he didn't push. He waited, let her decide. A moment passed, then another. Finally she nodded. He moved quickly but gently, looping the rope under her arms, securing her close to him. She was lighter than he expected, maybe 90 pounds. He felt every bone. The rain picked up again as they moved. The roof was slick and twice he nearly lost his footing. The rope was their only lifeline. He held her with one arm, using the other to brace against the slope, inching backward until they reached the edge. The raft swayed just below them, bumping softly against the gutter. "Hold on," he said, easing her down, keeping his body between her and the drop. Her feet touched the raft. He followed, his hands never leaving the rope. The wind hit harder now, swirling water into their faces. Jamal grabbed a tarp from the back of the raft and wrapped it around her shoulders. "We're going to get you dry. Just hang in there," he said. She didn't respond, her eyes half closed, but she clung to his forearm as if it were the only thing keeping her in this world. He untied the anchor and picked up the oars. It would be a slow trip back, but she was alive and that was enough. The raft wobbled as Jamal adjusted his weight, one hand still holding the rope, the other gripping the edge of the roof for balance. The wind was louder now, whistling through the broken chimneys like a warning. The old woman clung to him, her breath shallow against his chest. She only opened her eyes once, cloudy, filled with tears, though he couldn't tell if it was from the rain or from crying. Her fingers trembled as they dug into the fabric of his jacket, and for a moment he thought she might pass out. Jamal moved quickly. He settled her into the raft center, wrapped the tarp tighter around her frail frame, and adjusted the life vest he'd pulled from the emergency kit. She said nothing, her eyes distant, fixed on something far beyond the flooded streets. He didn't press her, not yet. The rope, once their lifeline, now served as his tether. He untied it from the chimney base, coiled it quickly, then gripped the oars. The raft rocked again, but he was ready. He pushed off from the house with one foot, steering them back into the dark current. Navigating back wasn't easy. The water had risen since he'd first arrived. Whole rooftops that had once been visible were now gone beneath the surface. Pieces of broken fences, patio furniture, and even the nose of a submerged sedan floated nearby, like tombstones of a lost neighborhood. The raft pitched and groaned against the waves. Every stroke Jamal took was met with resistance, thick, swirling water that dragged at the paddles and tried to turn them. He leaned his weight into each row, his breath steady but strained. His arms ached, his shoulders burned, but he didn't slow down. He kept glancing over his shoulder, watching the old woman in the middle of the raft. Her hands were still clenched even beneath the tarp, and her lips moved now and then, silently mouthing something to the air. He didn't know if it was prayer or memory. A gust of wind slammed into them from the left. The raft twisted hard, nearly tipping. Jamal dropped one oar and lunged forward, grabbing the raft's edge with both hands to stabilize them. The old woman gasped, her eyes wide for the first time since they'd left the rooftop. Jamal locked eyes with her, nodded once, then reached into the water and retrieved the drifting oar with one quick scoop. "We're okay," he said, more to reassure her than himself. "We're all right. Just a little wind." She didn't respond, but she didn't look away from him either. That was something. The water around them was a maze now. Landmarks were gone. Even the tall oak near the Johnson's house, the one he remembered from earlier, was completely submerged. He turned slightly east, following instinct more than memory. The sky was dark enough that the sun couldn't guide him. All he had was movement, sound, and the faint silhouette of the floodlights that marked the emergency triage zone, still faint on the horizon. The trip back took nearly 3 times longer. His muscles screamed, his hands wet and raw, blistered around the oar handles, but he didn't stop, not once. Every time the raft jerked or twisted, he shifted with it. Every time the wind knocked them sideways, he countered. The old woman never screamed, never panicked. She just kept holding on. Finally, as they turned past the collapsed remains of what used to be a school gym, he saw it. A line of white tents flapping in the wind, the red cross on the largest one glowing faintly under floodlight. Jamal exhaled through his teeth. He didn't smile, but something in his shoulders relaxed for the first time in an hour. As they approached, 2 medics in neon jackets ran toward the dock's edge, shouting instructions to each other. Jamal didn't even have to wave. They'd seen the raft coming from far off. "Bring her in slow," one of them yelled. "I got her," Jamal shouted back. They guided the raft to the loading platform, arms reaching to lift the old woman out gently. Jamal stayed close, helping ease her onto a stretcher, making sure the tarp stayed around her shoulders. Her eyes flickered again, and this time she looked around. She was seeing it. The floodlights, the hum of generators, the people moving in and out of tents. Maybe for the first time she realized it was real, that she had survived. The medics rolled her away toward the medical tent. Jamal followed for a few paces, soaked through, his boots sloshing with each step. One of the doctors gave him a thumbs up. Another handed him a foil blanket, which he barely noticed. He stood under the edge of the tent flap, staring after the stretcher as it disappeared into the white canvas. His chest rose and fell with each breath, his heart finally slowing, though his ears still rang with the roar of wind and water. A woman walked by, handing him a bottle of water. He took it but didn't drink. Instead, he just sat on the edge of a crate and looked out toward the drowned street he'd come from. He had no idea who she was, that old woman. No name, no history. Just someone everyone else had left behind. And yet she hadn't given up, not really. She'd waited, for her son, for her husband, for something. And when no one else came, Jamal had. He didn't need a medal for that, he didn't even need a thank you. But he was glad, deeply, wordlessly glad, that he'd stopped the boat, that he hadn't listened to Brooks or the others, that he'd trusted his gut and gone back. Somewhere in that decision, quiet, unseen, uncelebrated, was everything he stood for. The storm had passed by morning. What remained was a strange stillness that felt heavier than the wind. No more sirens, no more roaring waves or crashing trees, just the soft hum of generators and the low murmur of tired voices beneath white tents stretched across the edge of what used to be the town square. The sky was gray, but the kind of gray that promised a return to sun. Jamal hadn't slept. He sat on a folding chair outside the medic tent, his boots still soaked, his uniform streaked with dried mud and salt. His hands were wrapped in gauze from the blisters on his palms. He'd refused offers to lie down. He just kept watching the entrance of the tent, waiting for news about the woman he'd brought in last night. Eventually, a nurse stepped out and nodded toward him. "She's awake." She asked for the young man who brought her in. He stood slowly, his legs stiff, every joint reminding him of the fight against the current. The nurse held the flap open and Jamal ducked inside. The tent smelled like antiseptic and damp cotton. Beds lined the walls, but the woman was alone near the back, wrapped in a thick blanket. Her gray hair had been combed, her skin no longer pale blue but a fragile pink. She looked smaller now, not in danger but still fragile, like something precious pulled from the rubble. She turned her head slowly as Jamal approached, her eyes clearer than yesterday, though still heavy with something deeper. "You came back," she said softly. Jamal gave a small nod. "Yes, ma'am. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." Her eyes filled with tears, but they didn't fall. "I didn't mean to make it harder for you. I didn't think anyone would come." "You didn't make anything harder," he said. "I'm just glad you're safe now." There was a silence between them, but not an uncomfortable one. She studied his face as if searching for something, perhaps the reason why he hadn't left like the others. Finally she said, "My name is Eleanor Davis." He nodded respectfully. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Davis." She smiled faintly. "You don't recognize the name, do you?" Jamal hesitated. "Should I?" "My husband," she said quietly, "was Major General Robert Davis. And my son Matthew Davis was a rescue officer. He died 3 years ago in a flood just like this." Jamal's chest tightened. "When they told us to evacuate," she continued, I thought maybe Robert and Matthew would come for me. I know how it sounds, but when you've lost everything, sometimes the only thing that makes sense is to wait for what's already gone." Her voice trembled, but she held her chin up like the soldier's wife she was. Jamal didn't speak. He just stood there, letting her talk, letting the story settle into the space between them. "He used to tell me," she said, "if the water ever comes this high, you get on the roof, you take food, you wait. He never said what to do if no one shows up." "I think," Jamal said gently, "you did the right thing. You waited. And someone did come." She looked away then, but not before he saw the tears finally slip free. "I don't know why you stopped," she whispered. "All the others passed me by. I heard them, boats shouting and moving on. But you climbed that roof." He didn't say anything right away. Then he sat on the folding chair beside her and looked at the floor for a moment. "I grew up watching people get overlooked," he said. "In my neighborhood, if you weren't loud or lucky, you got left behind. When I joined the team, I promised myself I wasn't going to be one of those people who passed by." She reached out and placed her hand over his, her touch light but steady. "You remind me of my son. He was quiet too. Always listening. Always doing the work no one wanted to do." They sat in silence for a moment, not needing more words. When Jamal left the tent, the sky had opened slightly, a hint of blue cutting through the clouds. He walked back toward the supply station when a man in a gray suit stepped in front of him, mid-50s, clean-shaven, an air of importance. He looked at Jamal with practiced calm. "Excuse me," the man said. "Are you the one who brought in Eleanor Davis?" Jamal straightened slightly. "Yes, sir, I am. I'm Alan Fierce. I work for the mayor's office." She asked to speak to the mayor directly. "In person." Jamal blinked. "The mayor." "She insisted," the man said, "and when Eleanor Davis insists, people move." Jamal watched as the man walked off, talking into a radio. He didn't know what was about to happen, but it felt bigger than him. All he had done was listen to a gut feeling, climb a slippery roof and pull a woman from the edge of something final. He hadn't expected it to matter to anyone but her. But Eleanor Davis had a name this town remembered, and now so did he. 3 days later, the storm was already a fading headline, yesterday's news. Most people had power again. Most roads were being cleared. The media had moved on to the next fire, the next crisis. But inside City Hall, something different was happening. The Grand Chamber, usually quiet unless budget talks or elections were being argued, was packed from wall to wall. Emergency workers, council members, veterans in uniform and volunteers sat in neat rows. News cameras lined the back, their lenses pointed at the podium draped in the state flag. The mayor adjusted the mic, cleared her throat and glanced down at her notes before looking up. "We're gathered here not just to honor the bravery of those who served during Hurricane Michael," she began, her voice steady, "but to acknowledge a single act that reminded us what courage really looks like when no one's watching." The crowd quieted further. There were no coughs, no shifting in chairs, only the whir of the cameras and the sound of rain starting again, gently tapping the tall windows behind the podium. "This city has known many heroes," the mayor continued, "but today I want to tell you about one whose name many of us didn't know until now." She turned slightly and motioned to the side of the room. Jamal stood just beyond the curtain, his rescue jacket pressed, his boots cleaned for the first time in a week. He hadn't wanted to come, he'd argued it wasn't necessary. But Eleanor Davis had looked him dead in the eye that morning and said, "Sometimes the people need to see what right looks like." So here he was. The mayor called his name and Jamal walked out into the light. The room stood, all of it, not just polite applause but a real standing ovation. People clapped like they meant it, like they needed to. Jamal didn't smile, he simply nodded once and stepped forward to the microphone. He didn't read from paper, he hadn't prepared a speech. He looked out at the faces. Some strangers, some colleagues, some from neighborhoods like the one he grew up in, and said, "I wasn't supposed to be here today. I was supposed to do my job same as everyone else. Check houses, follow protocol, move on." He paused. The room was silent again. But something didn't feel right that day. And I didn't know who was up on that roof. I didn't know her name. I just knew I wouldn't sleep if I didn't check. Turns out her name meant something to this town. But let me say this, it wouldn't have mattered if she was nobody. I still would have gone. He glanced down for a second, then back up. This job isn't about being seen. It's about not looking away. No one said anything, but a few people wiped their eyes. The mayor returned to the stage and handed him a plaque, an official commendation signed and sealed by the governor's office. Then she held up another envelope and announced, "Effective immediately, Officer Jamal Thompson is being promoted to rescue team captain, the youngest in our state's history." Jamal didn't react right away. The applause came again, louder this time with shouts and cheers. But his eyes found Eleanor Davis in the front row. She was standing now, back straight, in a pressed black coat with a silver pin on the collar, her husband's insignia. Her eyes were shining, and for the first time since the storm, Jamal let himself smile. After the ceremony, reporters crowded him, but he kept his answers short. He wasn't interested in fame. He just kept looking over at the woman who reminded him why it all mattered. Later, outside City Hall, the wind had picked up again, but it was gentler now, almost warm. Jamal stood on the steps, holding the plaque in one hand and his helmet in the other. Eleanor joined him, walking slowly but with purpose. "They say you'll be on the news tonight," she said. "I don't watch the news much," he replied. She smiled. "Good. The real work isn't done on camera anyway." He looked out at the street where rescue trucks still rolled by, where people were still rebuilding. He nodded. "Still more rooftops to check," he said quietly. Eleanor rested a hand on his arm. "And now, more people who will follow your lead." He didn't answer, just let the words settle in. That night, the news did run his story, and the next day kids in neighborhoods like the one Jamal came from pointed at the screen and said, "That guy looks like me." But Jamal didn't see any of it. He was already back on duty, checking zones no one had double-checked, making sure no one was left behind. Not because someone was watching, but because someone might still be waiting. And for the first time in a long time, the city knew his name. And this time it was worth saying.